Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the virtual edition of our SeCan Fall Business Meeting. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be covering some variety information today, and I'm sure there's going to be other folks joining us in the waiting room. But before we get started, I'd just like to review a couple of housekeeping items. I'm Brenda Trask, Manager of Communications for SeCan, and in that spirit, I'm going to ask you if you will stay on mute throughout the meeting. It just makes for a better experience for everyone. You may want to use speaker view. Again, that will focus on the speaker. And we do encourage discussion via the chat feature today. Remember that your questions are seen by everyone, and we will ask staff to answer them in real time if they're able to do that. If we don't get to all your questions during the meeting, we'll follow up after. And again, we encourage your participation. Virtual is not always the best way to engage in conversation, but it will work. So again, just a quick review on your screen at the bottom left is the unmute and the video. You may want to keep both of those off for better internet connection. The chat is at the bottom, and then speaker view, if you go to the top right corner, you can choose that function. So let's get started. I'll turn it over to Todd Hyra to review the agenda.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's as promised, we'd hope to see everyone in person, but due to weather and distance, we couldn't make it all work. So we're glad to be able to join you virtually today. So yesterday we went through a business portion of the agenda. So Jeffrey presented a SeCan business update, and then I went through PBR, VUA, bacterial leaf streak, and Maddie finished up with communications. So the PBR, VUA, bacterial leaf streak, and communications update will all be posted online so that you can view that. If you missed it yesterday, those will be all posted. And then today's entire meeting will be recorded as well. So if you have to go back and reference some of the variety information, those will all be posted as well. So today we've got two big pieces that we're going to go through. The first one will be Jim Downey, who will go through the new variety releases that will happen either now or into next year. So there's a lot of new material coming, as always. So it's an exciting time for us right before the holidays. And then the staff, the Western reps, will be doing an overview of what they're seeing and hearing, and some of the marketing that's going behind the products that are commercially and available commercially. So that'll be what's the second half of the meeting. And you'll have plenty of time to ask questions along the way in the chat. Just a reminder that our mission is SeCan exists so there'll be conditions favorable to member success in the seed industry now and in the future for a justifiable investment of member resources. So SeCan is really about you. It's about our members. And so make sure you take the opportunity to ask questions in the chat. And if you don't have, if you want to follow up with either me or Jim or any of the Western staff, please fire us a message. We'd be happy to reply. A reminder that we'll be in compliance with the Competition Act. And so that means that because we're groups of seed companies across a wide area, we need to avoid topics that would not comply with the Act, such as pricing or supply. It's certainly legitimate to talk about industry management trends, tools, economics trends. Those are all legitimate. But if we steer into areas of pricing or supply, we'll have to end that conversation to make sure we're in compliance with the Act. We're going to turn things over now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to turn it over to Jim Downey, our R&D manager. And Jim will take us through the next almost 45 minutes to an hour of new varieties. So there's lots of exciting stuff here. So Jim, take it away.
Thanks, Todd. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Downey with SeCan Research Development out of Saskatoon. So I'm just going to move my screen around a bit here so I can see my slides. And so we've got a lot of stuff to go through, so I'll keep rolling as quickly as possible. I'm going to start out with a new hard red spring wheat called AAC Dutton VB. This was called BW 1094, and so this comes out of Ag Canada Research Station in Brandon. So we've been working with Brandon to keep the program productive for quite a few years now. So this is just a shot of some trials. This is up by Edmonton and near St. Albert. And just trying to give you a summary of this AAC Dutton VB. So I've got it highlighted here with these yellow arrows. And we're just showing that it stands up well. So it's got nice, short, strong straw. You can see this right beside wheatland here to the right, and wheatland standing up with high fertility at the back, lower fertility in the front. And you can see this Dutton is standing up very close to what wheatland did. Starbuck showing a little more lodging at the back, Brandon showing a little more lodging under high fertility, but AAC Dutton standing up very well. So that's what we want to see in a new hard red spring wheat. So it's a nice, short, strong straw. And we think it'll be a real nice complement to wheatland and Starbuck. So we'll get into that in just a second here. So we intended to offer this out this fall. We've had a problem with a few off types that showed up in some of the breeder seeds and some of the foundation select seed we grew. So we're actually delaying it a year to clean it up a bit. So it'll be offered out next fall again. So you'll hear about this next in my presentation next fall. This is from Ag Canada Brandon. Santosh Kumar is the breeder. You can see Cardale is one of the parents in the background. Midge Tolerant, Semidorf CWRS. Came through with about 110% of the yield of Carberry. Wheatland was about 112. So this one would be very close to the wheatland Starbuck type yields. Maybe not quite as high, but within a 1 or 2%, and a little bit higher yield than Viewfield. This one is a day earlier than Carberry, only a centimeter taller than Carberry, so very close to wheatland Starbuck, and lodging was equal to Carberry. So that's what I was trying to show in that first picture. It stands up very well. Resistant to leaf rust, stem rust, bunt, and MR for Fusarium head blight and stripe rust. So this would be shorter and stronger straw than Starbuck, but it has better Fusarium head blight resistance than wheatland. Wheatland is rated intermediate for FHB. So this would be potentially something like an wheatland with better Fusarium tolerance. So that's just a idea for positioning this variety. Hopefully you can see my mouse pointer. I'm just trying to circle there. There's the 110% of the yield of Carberry. I put wheatland and Starbuck in here from when they went through the co-op trial. So this is a very indirect comparison here at the bottom. Different years in the co-op trials, but just gives me an idea of how they did when they went through the co-ops. You can see here it's earlier than Carberry, that height just a centimeter taller. Wheatland and Starbuck were taller when they went through the co-ops. These heights changed based on the weather conditions, environment conditions during those years in trial. So don't compare the heights too directly. But lodging here, you can see very similar to Carberry, actually quite a bit better than Starbuck, similar to wheatland. So that's just some of the data there. The protein looks very comparable to wheatland Starbuck, also with a pretty high falling number, which usually or sometimes the high falling numbers can translate into better sprouting tolerance. Here's Dutton at Ag Canada Brandon with Dennis Green, their chief technician, and you can see similar height to a wheatland Starbuck, kind of in the mid-thigh range. Going to move on to a new Durham variety. This one was called DT 2015. This is growing at Pence near Regina, compared to Defy. You can see Defy on the right, and then this new variety is called AAC Antler. Antler like a deer horn or the deer antler. And here's another shot, Defy on the left here and Antler on the right. This one should be offered in January of 2023. So that's this next month. We delayed this one a month so that you can see the Saskatchewan seed guide if you're interested in Durham and see how it compares compared to the other Durham varieties. Looks like it should come in at about, in the Durham area, about 109% of strong field. And so it won't be the top yielder. It will be a little bit lower yielding than Defy, but it will be very respectable, and it'll be one of the top 5 or 6 varieties for yield. This has a Transcend in the background as a parent. It comes out of Ag Canada Swift Current, and the Transcend parentage, I look at that to say, okay, will this have grade retention similar to Transcend? So we're hoping it does. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we look at the grading data. This one is MS star for grade retention. So that MS star really is the Saskatchewan rating. Now that's actually the stars changed to a 5 in the seed guide, but really it's just a footnote to say it has better than average fusarium head blight resistance when we rate it as a moderately susceptible. It is not quite as good as Schrader. Schrader has an intermediate rating, but it's getting to be splitting hairs at that stage when they go from MS star to an I. This one is was about 3%, 103% of the yield of Strongfield, and just slightly lower yield, about 99% of Schrader, at least when it came through the co-op trials. Protein was equal to Strongfield and a bit better than Schrader. Maturity is a 1 day later than Strongfield, equal to Schrader. Test weight was equal to both Strongfield and Schrader. And height was 86 centimeters, so a touch taller than Strongfield and a bit shorter than Schrader, but better, stronger straw than Strongfield and Cabrey. Just some co-op data here at the bottom. So this should be AAC antler, and there you can see 3% better than Strongfield, very close to Schrader in yields. Maturity similar to Schrader. Height was 86, a little taller there than the Strongfield. Height, lodging 2.2, so that's better than Strongfield. And you can see the grain protein very similar to Strongfield. What I wanted to focus on here was the grading of the samples in the co-op registration trials. So over the 3 years, normally I don't show these numbers, but over the 3 years they do grain quality data, and they grade the samples that they make up a composite from various sites and they grade that composite. And each year of the co-op, this AAC antler graded it as a number 1. And it was the only variety of all these check varieties, it was the only one that graded a number 1 all 3 years. So we need to pay attention to that, because is that giving us a hint that this is going to have good grade retention? And would that possibly come, maybe it would possibly come from Transcend as one of the parents. So our hope for this variety, and it will be positioned as this potentially good grade retention, similar to Transcend. You can see it's got a fairly high falling number, which often translates or is related to pretty good grade retention too, and sprouting tolerance. So that's just one of the things. Rhonda Powell pointed this out to us, that it graded number 1 in all 3 years of co-op trials, which nothing else did. So we took that to say we should be interested in that variety, because grade retention is a big issue in durum. And just another shot of it here. This is AAC antler on the left and Grainland on the right. You can see it's maybe slightly shorter than Grainland, but it's not a short variety. It's up there with Strongfield. I'm going to move on to a new general purpose wheat. This one's called GP250. It'll be named in the future. This one is a very interesting new wheat that comes out of the University of Alberta from Dean Spainer's program. Dean Spainer has tested about 2,000 lines per year out of the CIMMET program. That's a wheat breeding program in Mexico. They're breeding high yielding wheats for the third world to feed hungry people. And out of 46,000 lines, so he's tested these lines for about 23 years. This is the only line that's made it through to registration. So this is 1 in 46,000, and it tells you how many varieties he had to screen to find this one. So this one, it's got better disease tolerance than most of the other ones he's looked at, but a very good yielder. So there's just a shot of it here. And this is at maturity. This is at Warren, Manitoba, at Craig Riddell's farm, just to the north and west of Winnipeg. You can see standing up very well, mid-thigh on Todd, so kind of a nice height, very nice look. This is a GP250, special purpose wheat. We should be offered out this fall from the University of Alberta. A couple named different kind of varieties in the background, European types. This is a high yielding feed wheat. It's on hollow stem, and with about 104% of the yield of Andrew. So when something yields better than Andrew or better than the soft whites, we have to pay attention to that. And about 7% better yield than pasture in these registration trials. But it was 2 days earlier in the pasture, about 2 days later than Andrew. So pasture, we used to say, was about 7 days later than something like a Carberry. This one is shorter than Andrew, 4 centimeters shorter and 5 centimeters shorter than past year, with better lodging than Andrew and a larger kernel than Andrew in past year too. It has resistance to leaf rust, stem rust, stripe rust, and the only downside is it's moderately susceptible to fusarium head blight. Just some registration trial data here from 3 years in the co-op. 2 years in the co-op. And this one is 104% of the yield of Andrew, so that's very respectable. That's hard for most varieties. This is actually a hard red wheat, so it's hard for most hard reds to beat the soft white wheats like Andrew. Maturity was in here just at 97 days, so 1 day later than Andrew. Height, you can see, is quite short, strong strawed here with a 2 similar to past year, and good test weight and very large kernels. It's just a shot of GP 250 in the field with Dean Spainer here on the right and Iqbal, his chief technician. And you can see just a really nice plant type. Very short, strong straw. I'm going to move on here to a new winter wheat variety from Rob Graff's program. It's called AAC Overdrive. This is W614 as it came through the registration trials. This one here on the left, and we'll compare it a little bit to Cold Front that we offered out last year. This is AAC Overdrive again in the field. This was at this past last year at Brandon. Looking pretty good there, nice and short, strong straw. So just this was a shot that Rob Graff provided. You can see Wildfire over here on the left with the bronze chaff, and then Cold Front here next to it. And then over here on the side, it's hard to see it, but it's W614 or the Overdrive, and it's probably the shortest of all these varieties in here. And the next one here is the same picture, but at maturity, you can see the W614 or the Overdrive here, shortest of them all standing up very nicely. Very different look than Wildfire, and quite a bit shorter than the Cold Front. So just a quick summary, this will be offered out next summer from Rob Graff's program Lethbridge. Early maturity with short, strong straw and the best disease package available in a winter wheat. So Rob Graff has just recently retired from Ag Canada. And he says that this one is the best disease package available in all the winter wheats. This one is about 4% better yield than Elevate and 3% better than Vortex, about 109% of Buteo. In our new seed guide, this one doesn't appear yet, but it should be one of the top 3 or 4 varieties for yield. It'll be probably a little bit lower yielding than something like Wildfire and Cold Front, but much earlier maturing. Again, short, strong straw, good winter survival, 87% survival, and early maturity, about 5 days earlier than Wildfire. This one is resistant to stem rust, stripe rust, and bunt, MR to fusarium head blight and leaf rust, and lodging was similar to Vortex. So this would be a broadly adapted, earlier maturing than winter wheat, earlier than Wildfire, about 5 days earlier than Wildfire and Cold Front. So positioning of this, you'd think of this more like a Falcon for maturity, with better MR to fusarium head blight and really good overall disease package, with a slightly lower yield than something like Cold Front. You can see here just the data through the co-op trials. There's 109% of Buteo. Cold Front, when it went through the co-ops, different years though, was about 113. So I expect Overdrive to be a few percent lower yielding than Cold Front in the seed guides. But you can see here about 5 days earlier than something like Cold Front. It's probably maturity would be even earlier than Buteo and Elevate here. So that tells me it's going to be on that early end for maturity. Height is quite short, a lot shorter than Buteo, and even shorter than Cold Front. Lodging is quite strong at 2.1, not quite as good as Cold Front, but quite acceptable there. And just some other data there to show pretty good protein and pretty high falling number. going to move on to a new oat variety out of Ag Canada Brandon. So this is Kirby Nielsen. He's the new oat breeder who replaced Jennifer Mitchell Fetch. And our new oat variety is called OT 2134. This one will be offered out, should be offered out this fall. And it's from Ag Canada Brandon, from Kirby Nielsen. It has Morgan as one of the parents, and has a yellow hull color. Some people would call it a white hull, but it's actually more of a yellow hull. It has very short, strong straw and about 11% better yield than Summit, with maturity equal to Summit and Morgan. And it's rated MS to crown rust. The crown rust races have changed. Normally these varieties would have some crown rust resistance out of Ag Canada Brandon, but this one is MS to crown rust. It's resistant to smut and barley yellow dwarf virus, intermediate to stem rust, has high test weight, high percent plump, and low percent thins. So this one, we can see down here, OT 2134. This one should be about 99% of Morgan. So whenever something yields like a Morgan, we start to pay attention. You can see it's got better yield than Douglas, much better yield than Summit, and it has height. It was about the same maturity as Morgan. Height is quite a bit shorter than Morgan at 82 centimeters, and it actually stood up better than Morgan in the co-op trials. With the lower the number, the better. So you can see it's got some yield and it's standing up, and it's got a good test weight, and has a higher percent plump than the Morgan too in here. So, and low percent thins, pretty good growth percentages too. So overall, looks like a fairly nice quality milling oat, and you can see it's a little bit better than Douglas for yield, and a little bit better for straw strength, and quite a bit shorter. So just some pictures here of this variety, 2134. This is at Craig Riddell's farm again at Warren, Manitoba, standing up very, very uniformly, very nicely. This is a shot of Todd standing in it this summer at Craig Riddell's farm. You can see it's below Todd's waist, kind of just on the upper thigh for Todd. So just a really nice height, and you can see really nice standability. So Craig Riddell was impressed with how well this variety stood up. Going to move on to another new oat. So that was OT 2134. This was OT 7104. This is a tall but high yielding oat variety that comes out of a kind of a joint project between Ag Canada Ottawa and Ag Canada Brandon. So this one is again will be offered out this fall. It comes out of Ag Canada Ottawa from Wee Kai Yan is the oat breeder there. This one has a tan hull, so that's something to watch out for if that's an issue for you. This was a very high yielder. This was about 114% of the yield of Summit, with maturity 1 day later than Morgan and Summit, and height 7 centimeters higher than Summit and 1.3 centimeters taller than Morgan. So this is later and quite tall. Lodging though was equal to Morgan, so it stood up pretty well, but it is susceptible to crown rust and stem rust. So quite a few of the lines from Ottawa, when we bring them to the West, they don't seem to quite stand up for the rust resistance. We have different races than they do out in Ottawa. This one, so there's 2134 from, that's the one we just talked about from Ag Canada Brandon. Here for yield, as a comparison, here's OT 7104. You can see a higher yield on this one, but the height is one thing to note, 93 centimeters tall, so quite tall. And just a little bit later maturing here than Morgan and 2134. It did stand up as good as Morgan, but not quite as good as 2134. And it has a very large kernel, as 43 milligrams is quite large, but very plump and low percent thins. So that's kind of an interesting new variety with probably going to be a top yielder for a milling oat. Keep in mind it's got that tan hull. Here's a shot of Todd standing in this variety out at Craig Riddell's farm near Warren, Manitoba. And you can see that's getting up fairly tall compared to the 2134. This is the 2134 versus the 7104. You can see 7104 is noticeably taller.
Hey, Jim, sorry to break in.
Yeah.
7104 is actually white-hulled. I confirmed it with Wee Kai last week.
Okay.
So, and our samples came back white as well.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks, Trent. Okay, we're going to move on to another oat. This is a forage oat, OT 6037. This one was, you can see, has a very upright flag leaves, kind of a unique look. So there's the flag leaf sticking upright, and then as it grows, you can see very, very large, big leaves. So we're looking at this as a potential replacement to CDC Haymaker forage oat. This one was bred by Jim Dick at Oat Advantage. He's a private breeder out of Saskatoon. This should be offered out this fall. It is a forage oat with improved grain yield. So the concept is that it was hard to grow CDC Haymaker because of low grain yield. And the Haymaker had the lemma on, kind of an on sticking out of the seed, which made it hard to clean. So we'll talk about that in 1 second here. This one looks better in both respects. This one is 102% of Summit. For grain yield. So we have a very respectable grain yield, similar to some of our milling oats. Late maturity about 6 days later than Summit. We would expect late maturity in a forage oat, and strong straw. Now, we don't have a lot of co-op data. We have a co-op data from only the 2021 co-op so far. So this 6037 was put in there, and this is really looking at grain data, grain yield and grain quality. We don't have a lot of information from this on forage yields, but this one was about 81% of Morgan for grain yield, which was actually slightly better than Summit in that year. So that means we're getting up into a good zone for grain yield production. Maturity was late. You can see here about 6 days later than Summit, even 3 days later than Morgan. But it did stand up fairly well, similar to Summit, and just slightly weaker than Morgan. So that's good news. And it had fairly large kernels and quite plump kernels with low percent thins. Also a decent growth percentage and decent beta glucan. So this is just another shot of 6037, the forage oat here beside Haymaker. You can see Haymaker is tall, starting to go over. This is up by Edmonton again. This one looking a little bit later, but much shorter and stronger strawed. And this is a shot here again at Warren, Manitoba, at Craig Riddell's with Todd. You can see that's up just above his waist. So it's but a reasonable height, not incredibly tall. So it's not chest height on Todd. It's just above his waist. So a little bit taller than 6134. Here's another interesting shot for this OT 6037. On the Haymaker, it has this long, thin seed with the lemma on sticking out of the seed, makes it very hard to clean the seed, where this 6037 has a much plumper seed with no lemma on. So we hope that makes the life of the seed grower much easier for this 6037. We're going to move on to a new flax variety called FP 2591. So again, a shot at Craig Riddell's farm this summer. You can see that's about just over the knee height on Todd, standing up quite well there. This one should be offered out this fall, and it's from the Crop Development Center, University of Saskatchewan. Bunyamin Taran is the new breeder. I'll show you a picture of him in a minute. This one is about 5% better yield than Glass and about 9% better yield than Bethune. So we kind of have a family of three new varieties. We have Roland, and then CDC Roland, CDC Kernan, and then this FP 2591. All kind of higher yielding varieties that came through the high yield breeding program or high yield selection program at the Crop Development Center. So whenever they come through that program, we try to pay attention to see, are these varieties going to be some of the top yielders? So this one is larger seeded than Glass and Bethune. So we always pay attention to seed size. Larger seed is better in flax, and maturity 3 days later than Glass, but this will not be as late as something like Roland. It should be a bit earlier. And height was about 2 centimeters less than Glass, and should be shorter and larger seeded than CDC Kernan. So sometimes these flax varieties are hard to position. And this one we think will be like a shorter, larger seeded version compared to Kernan. So my guess is in the seed guide that FP 2591 will be slightly lower yielding than the Kernan and the Roland. This is when Kernan and Roland went through the co-op trials, how they yielded, but again, different years. So it's hard to compare it too closely, but this would be one of the top 3 yielders, I think, in the Saskatchewan, in the seed guides. You can see 5% better yield than here than glass. And height, though, is quite a bit shorter than Kernan and Roland. And lodging, not quite as strong strawed as something like Kernan or glass, but respectable, not terrible. And kernel weight probably will still be called as or labeled as medium seed size, but you can see this is a larger seed than Kernan. And you can see also in the maturity, it will be about 2 days earlier than Roland down here. So it's going to be not as late as Roland, with shorter straw and larger seed than Kernan, and respectable oil content and linolenic acid content too. And that's just a picture of Bunyam and Turan standing in the breeder rows at the Kernan farm in 2021. So sometimes the flax varieties are hard to position, but we hope there'll be some members pick this up, because we think sometimes they surprise us when they go into the provincial variety trials and get into the seed guides. We think this one will be very competitive with Kernan and Roland. Going to move on to another field pea from Crop Development Center. This one's called CDC Hickey. So the members in Saskatchewan have already had access to this variety, and so our stock seed is actually coming out of some of the Saskatchewan members who've already grown CDC Hickey. So this is really, I'm presenting this just for the benefit of our members in Manitoba and Alberta. So this will be offered out this fall. It has been offered out already. So this one comes out of University of Saskatchewan, Tom Workington's program. This one has about 108% of the yield of Amarillo with kind of this medium seed size. This is a very typical seed size, similar to Amarillo, 230 grams. Medium maturity, lodging is at 3.5, which is equal to Amarillo, MR to Fusarium wilt, and good for seed coat breakage. So just here's the co-op data, and this is regional and Saskatchewan regional trials, co-op trials. It all kind of is run similar. And you can see here, this is compared to these Czech varieties, it's quite a bit better yielding, 108%, 110% in these 2 different regions. And again, otherwise, the varieties look similar. This one is not quite as tall as Lawachko. It's 85 centimeters tall. Again, maturity, lodging is very similar to the other varieties. Mycosphorella blight is similar, but it is MR for Fusarium wilt, which is better than Lawachko on spectrum. Good for seed coat breakage, and this seed weight, typical seed weight of about 230, similar to Amarillo. So it's really has improved yield and improved Fusarium wilt resistance. So that's looks like a fairly promising new yellow pea from Crop Development Center. Just another shot of it there. That's Tom Workington, the breeder. And that's this past summer at the Kernan farm. Going to move on to a CPS red wheat. This one is interesting because it's not midge tolerant. So this one has no stewardship agreement attached. This comes out of Ag Canada Lethbridge from Harpinder around Hawa as the breeder. You can see forage, tenacious, and penhold as parents. Some of those varieties we should recognize. On semi-dwarf hollow stem, midge susceptible, with better yield than 4A, 107% of the yield of penhold, and 22% better yield than Carberry. This one is shorter than 6 centimeters shorter than 4A and about 8 centimeters taller than penhold, so right between the two. Similar lodging is similar to 4A, maturity equal to 4A, and that's about 2 days later than penhold. Protein was equal to 4A and a little bit lower than penhold. Falling number is higher than the average of the Czechs, so that's usually good. Usually means it has pretty good sprouting tolerance, and it's MR for Fusarium head blight, so that's an improvement over 4A. 4A was rated intermediate. This has stem rust, leaf rust, stripe rust, and bunt resistance. So that's a pretty nice disease package in a CPS red wheat. Just some data here from the co-op trials. We talked about Rimby a year ago. That came out of Ag Canada Swift Current. This Rimby VB, this is a midge tolerant line. Westlock is the new one here. We're going to be offering out. It is midge susceptible with not quite as high yield as Rimby, but a little shorter, a little stronger straw than the Rimby. And you can compare it up here to 4A at the top. So it looks like a decent, really quite a decent package with this little bit shorter, stronger straw, and very competitive yield, higher yield than the Penhold. And over here we have a pretty good grain protein comparable to 4A with the high falling number again. So Westlock and Rimby look quite similar in the field. This is Westlock on the left, Rimby on the right, again at St. Albert N21. Just another shot of it there, as a new CPS red wheat. We talked about Rimby last year. I'm just going to refresh your memory on that one. If you're interested in CPS reds, this one was a midge tolerant variety. It would have the stewardship agreement with it coming out of Ag Canada Swift Current. It's got some tenacious and Penhold in the background, and you can see the yield there a little better than 4A and Penhold, and a little bit shorter than 4A, taller than Penhold. So that's what we just saw. The very similar height to the Westlock, and FHB and bunt are intermediate, so not quite as good for fusarium head blight as the Westlock, but still has the good stem rust, leaf rust, and stripe rust resistance. And the co-op data is there. You can look at that if you want to. We can send this out to you if you want, but just to remind us that it was 81. It's a little bit shorter than the 4A there. Not quite as strong straw as the 4A. And that's 4A on the right, Rimby on the left. Going to move on to barley. This is one we've waited for a long time. This is called CDC Durango. This is Ward and Laurie Oatway. They grew the first 7-acre plot near Lacombe, Alberta, and it stood up very well for them. Just a few very small patches that lodged a little bit this past year. But this variety has looked impressive no matter where we've seen it. So I'm going to show you a few pictures of this one. This is our new 2-row feed barley to potentially replace CDC Austinson. This is a shot of it here at the Kernan farm where they do the breeder seed increase. So that's the plot of it again, standing up perfectly well there this past summer. So this is a Durango on the left and Austinson on the right. So you can see a bit more of an upright habit here. And you can see there's, I'm going to show you another picture here. So this is lower fertility in the front with higher fertility in the back. And you can see Durango here standing up perfectly. We're starting to see a little bit of lodging here in the front, even in Austinson. A lot more lodging in the back, but Durango has a little lodging in the middle, but standing up pretty well. So this is sort of the drone shot of this trial near St. Albert, about 107 pounds an acre, and here in the front, 136 pounds per acre of N in the back. So higher fertility. When we look at straw strength, we can compare to Kelly probably and Esma, some of our strongest lines from Europe, standing up very well in the front, just a hair, a little bit of lodging in the back. A lot of our other 2 rows are going flat like Metcalf and Copeland over here, where Durango standing up perfectly in the front, just that little bit of lodging there and doing better than Austinson and most other varieties in the back. So what we've seen, and Lauren Wensley has named it Durango is a machine because everywhere we go, it performs predictably. It stands up very well. So you can see that in this back row, it's one of the best. CDC Durango, 2-row feed barley out of Crop Development Center from Aaron Beatty's program. You can see it. The parents are Claymore by CDC Austinson. So 2-row hulled feed barley with a rough on, and we think it should be a very good Austinson replacement. 6% better yield than Austinson, so that's a nice yield jump. 8% better than Synergy, 15% better yield than Copeland. 1 day later than Austinson, 2 centimeters shorter. Height is equal to Metcalf, actually. Lodging, stronger straw than Austinson. We try to show you that in the pictures. Lodging was at 1.9 versus Austinson at 3.1. So that's quite a big numeric difference in lodging. And kernel weight was slightly lower than Austinson. Test weight slightly lower. Percent plump slightly lower. We'll just see that in the data here now in a sec. Surface-borne smut, it's resistant, moderately resistant to net form, net blotch. and intermediate resistance to spot blotch, stem rust, FHB. It still is susceptible to loose smut. So down here, so this is a 2019 and 2020. You can see here it was 15% better yield than the Copeland at the top, with that quite a yield jump over Austenson. So that's what we just love to see, is that something better, yielding better than Austenson, and also standing up better than Austenson. So that is a nice combination, with the height a little shorter than Austenson, and still has plump kernels, large kernel, nice kernel weight, and very high test weights. So that overall looks like a very nice variety. This is again in 21. You can see the Durango standing here, Austenson a little more floppy in the head. Just want to move on to another 2-row feed barley. This is actually 2-row forage barley called Renegade. This is just a reminder. We've offered this out before. Some of you are already growing it. This one is somewhat of a replacement for Maverick. So this is you can see it's much shorter, stronger, a little bit stronger strawed. Still not super strong strawed, but it's shorter than Maverick, with a much higher grain yield. This is Durango on the right. So this is our new 2-row feed Austenson replacement. This is the Renegade on the left. You can see it's quite a bit floppier, quite a bit weaker straw than Durango. This is Aaron Beatty, the breeder, standing in the middle. So just a quick reminder of this one. I'll go quickly through this. CDC Renegade, a 2-row hulled, smooth on forage barley, CDC Maverick replacement. And we're looking at forage yields very similar to Cowboy, a little bit higher than Cowboy and Austenson, but grain yield about 20% higher, 19 or 20% higher than Cowboy. So that's a big improvement in the grain yield. Again, for the seed grower, to make your life better, you don't have to take a big yield hit when you grow this for seed. The maturity is equal to Cowboy or Austenson, shorter than Cowboy, a little bit taller than Austenson. So between the two, lodging was actually close to Cowboy, and it was quite a bit quite a bit weaker straw than Austenson, and percent plump was equal to Austenson. So decent disease tolerance there. Again, susceptible to scald, and loose smut, we didn't have good data on that. Just Renegade here, there it is. Comparable yield, just slightly lower yield for grain than Austenson. Forage yield was better than Austenson, and days to mature similar to Austenson. Height taller than Austenson, but shorter than Cowboy, and lodging similar to Cowboy. So not a huge improvement for straw strength, but quite a bit shorter. We're hoping that helps it stand up a bit better. Just to get another shot, this is Maverick on the right with Renegade on the left. So this should hopefully be more of a higher grain yielding forage barley. You can see it's even shorter than Maverick. And Renegade over here on the right, quite a bit shorter than something like Maverick here on the left. I'm going to just remind us again of a couple other varieties. CDC Vanta Durham comes out of the Crop Development Center. This is Curtis Posniak with Vanta. We want to just kind of refresh our memory that this is a new desert Durham type, short, strong strawed with very, very black awns. The name Vanta comes from the term Vanta black, which was a super deep black color, and this one has very black awns. This was a potential Navigator replacement with desert Durham background, short, strong strawed Durham with black awns, a very high yellow grain pigment, improved pasta color, strong gluten, high falling number. This variety did very well in the drought in 21. So that desert Durham background brings with it some interesting traits. And Mira is going to talk about how it did this past year in some of her trials and some of the things we noticed. But this is one to pay attention to, just to know it's out there and that it stands up well. It seems to handle warm, dry conditions very well. So this is just stuff we've talked about before, a little better yield than Strongfield and about 10% better yield than Navigator. This one is better than Navigator for Fusarium. It's MS, so it's an improvement on Navigator all around, and it's resistant to leaf rust, stripe rust, and bunt. Just some co-op data there. You can see the yield here better than the the strong field, quite a bit better than Navigator, almost 10% better than Navigator. Maturity, it's not early, but height is quite short, very much like a Navigator for height, and improvement in lodging tolerance and high falling number. Going to just refresh our mind about AAC cold front winter wheat. This was really a somewhat similar to wildfire, but it had better disease package, so it was more broadly adapted than wildfire. That's cold front at Indian Head, and the shot here at I believe that was Lethbridge, this shot of cold front. This was offered out a year ago, last summer. This one is was W601. That was the code as it went through the co-ops. This one had good winter survival and 13% better yield than Buteo, 8% better yield than Elevate. This one looks like it's yielding at least as good as wildfire. Should be a top yielder in our Saskatchewan seed guide anyway. And so it's a good high yielder with the better leaf and stripe rust resistance. So here's how I've summarized it: better leaf rust, stem rust, stripe rust than wildfire. Intermediate FHB resistance versus wildfire at MR. So the only downside was not quite as good for fusarium, but better for the other diseases. So much improved rust resistance for the eastern prairies with shorter straw than wildfire. So that's just to remind us that cold front is out there. So I think the acres will move to varieties like cold front and or overdrive that we just talked about before. And so anyway, I'll skip on to, there's another picture. This is the cold front here versus Elevate. I'm going to spend a moment on malting barley update. So Lauren Wensley is going to talk a bit more about this. So I'll just touch on this briefly. So on the left, we have our recommended malting barley varieties from 2022, 2023. This is from the Canadian Malting Barley Technical Center. This is our list last year. So we can see there was 6 varieties on this list. So this is really direction to farmers and seed growers about what does the industry want to buy. And that's changed quite dramatically from into the new one here for 2023, 2024. So this is what's going to come out in the seed guides. This is what the new, this one is just a draft. They've just tweaked this just slightly, some of the words, but this is pretty close to the final version. You can see here they've moved from Copeland at the top to Connect at the top. Fraser has moved from second from the bottom to second from the top. So this is something that seed growers should really be looking at and really paying attention to, because these varieties in this list are arranged in the order of the number of tons that the industry would like to select. So the variety at the top is the variety they anticipate to select the greatest tons of for malting. So Fraser has moved up and should be the second most widely selected for malting this coming fall out of all those varieties. So Copeland, they're trying to move away from it and go to something newer, and that's been Fraser. So Fraser is super positive for Fraser, and Synergy has dropped down the list to it's the 4th on the list from being second from the top. So that's giving you a direct market signal to say, if you're not growing Fraser yet, start looking at it. We also have Churchill down here in the development stage, and that's okay to be there because we're anticipating Churchill should move up into the recommended varieties probably for next year. We're going to just talk. This is a meeting we had in Red Deer with members, our in-person meeting. We had 2 maltsters there to talk about varieties. And RAR told us they would be looking to select Fraser, Synergy, Connect, and Churchill. And Canada Malt told us they would be looking to select Fraser, Copeland, Connect, and Churchill. So Churchill is on this list, but Fraser is near the top. So that is super positive for varieties like Fraser and Churchill. And then this is a quick summary. CDC Fraser has growing demand and increasing production, being promoted as a high enzyme variety, potential replacement for Metcalf, and significant demand from maltsters, brewers, and international markets. So the key is here that some of the international markets, like the Chinese, have given approval to use Fraser, which means it can now go full steam ahead. So that's a big chunk. Usually half of the selections go overseas or over to other customers. And so consider increased seed production on Fraser. In CDC Churchill, it's in market development and gaining acceptance, and showing good drought tolerance for many growers. And we purposely try to get a variety like Fraser established with our customers. And we try not to confuse customers with too many varieties at once. So we try to get a variety tested, trialed, and either accepted or rejected. And that Fraser's been trialed and accepted, moving ahead. And now we'll move on to testing Churchill, shipping samples overseas to get it tested and accepted. So we try to work one variety at a time so we don't confuse customers. Anyway, that's it for my presentation. This is a shot of the plots at our Pence Research Farm. We have 80 acres that we've rented, and we have 26 acres per year in plots. We have a 3-year rotation, just a shot there. I've showed you some of these before. So should be open for questions or discussion, and you can always call us later too if you have questions. I'll turn it back to Todd.
Thanks, Jim. We'll just take a second while I switch over. Is there any questions for Jim? I think there's been some going on in the chat, and been answering those, but if anybody has any, continue to get those into the chat. I will get the next portion of the presentation queued up, and if there are no hands going up, we'll move on to that. So everybody can see my screen. Jim, give me a thumbs up on that one. I think we're good to go. Awesome.
That's good, Todd. Yeah.
All right, so the next portion of this is really about the commercial products, and it's what our members and reps and their customers are all seeing and hearing in the field. And so we took a different approach this year to our 2023 seed guide, and it's been fun to have this one out there, and because it's very much about the reality of what's going on in the field. And so each one of our staff picked 1 or 2 varieties and talked about why those are important to us. And so that's essentially what we're going to do over the next little bit, is talk about some of those products and a few others, and what we're seeing and hearing in the field in these big products for SeCan. So my product was CDC Roland. And whenever you name a variety after someone, and so this CDC Roland was named after Dr. Gordon Roland, who was the former flax breeder at the University of Saskatchewan. And when you name a variety in somebody's honor, you hope that it's really going to perform. And so CDC Roland is doing just that. We're really pleased with what we're seeing and hearing in the field this from the last 2 years. We talk about it in our ads being this next big jump in flax production. And so bigger yield, bigger seed, stronger straw with the kangaroo imagery. And this is sort of a theme that we'll be using for a few of these products, because I really do believe that we've seen a plateau or a shift. Once every generation, these varieties come along that change the way the crop is handled. And so Bethune did that back over 20 years ago with a new level in flax production. And that's what we're seeing with CDC Roland. So just a few comments from some of our members that I pulled from Twitter. Greg Tebbett talking about straight cutting a field of CDC Roland with Blake. Froze twice, spring, 3 inches of rain, but there it is, thanks to the Crop Development Center and SeCan, seed available for the spring of 2022. And then coming harvest, Blake's pulling it off, and it's a beautiful looking sample right off the combine. That big seed really does change the way the crop is managed. So it's not always just about yield, it's about everything that a variety brings forward. And this big seed is what kept CDC sorrel as an important part of the rotations for many years. And CDC Roland has that and more. Greg making a comment this past spring about his CDC Roland, again, looking beautiful, even in the face of cutworms and difficult growing conditions. So really liking that variety there. Other members, Southern Alberta, Stamps pulling off 50 bushels plus under irrigation. So the variety has the potential to really push flax yields into another level. And so it doesn't have to be just under irrigation as well. I was talking to Joe Wallace as we were preparing these slides, and he was cautious. He says it was in the 50 bushel range, but I haven't cleaned it yet. So it's but essentially in southern Manitoba, getting close to 50 bushel per acre. He had so much production that he was able to sell some off just as grain, and was getting 23.75. When he factors that in with the lower fertilizer input, it was really the one of the highest, I believe he said it was the highest net yielding variety on his farm. over all crops. And so that's something you don't hear that often from flax. And that's what you can kind of push CDC Roland in these new varieties for. And once again, this big seed, Joe was making the comment that he was so excited to clean this big seed, but then was learning from others that it's so big that shriveled wheat sometimes passes through. So when you can't clean wheat out of flax, it's a different problem than you normally have. So big seed will certainly factor in. As I mentioned, this will be part of a campaign going that we'll have for all of the new varieties that are coming out of this generation. So we've got CDC Kernan, which just launched this past year, which is also going to be piggybacking on this next big jump. So it is 2 days earlier than Roland. So that's its claim to fame, seed size and yield in a similar range to Roland. So a bit earlier, and it's out in 2022. I think the take-home message for me on CDC Roland was the pickup. We have not had this much flax grown by this many members across all of Western Canada in, I can't remember when. I've been at SeCan over 15 years now and don't recall ever seeing this. Flax is back in Manitoba, covers throughout all of Alberta, and then of course Saskatchewan, which has been the stronghold for flax production for the last several years. So great availability and great pickup from across the board. So Jim's going to tell you about CDC, about his pick.
Thanks, Todd. I had a conversation with Richard Cuthbert. He was the breeder of AEC Starbuck and AEC Wheatland VB. And we had not yet picked up the varieties, but said when these varieties come to market, they will change things. In other words, they had very significantly higher yield than something like the Brandons out there in the world. And they would set a kind of a new yield plateau. So I noted that down and thought, okay, we'll see how they do once they hit the field. So I'm always a slight bit skeptical and to see how the varieties actually perform when they hit the field and when they get into the provincial seed guides. So anyway, I grew Starbuck on my farm in 21, and so I'll get to that in a second. But first of all, here's some interesting tweets that came out from this is Brent McCarthy in Saskatchewan. We interrupt the Freedom Convoy 2022 coverage for a brief minute to let you know the Starbuck VB is clean and ready to go off the cleaner prices, ready to yield. So Brent was impressed with how the Starbuck did for him there at Corning, Saskatchewan. And then Cresswell Seeds there at Strasbourg, Saskatchewan, they put it right into the curling ice. They seem to like it there. So that's kind of interesting little tweets. But on my farm in 21, I had Brandon and Starbuck. And 21 was a terrible drought year. They performed about the same. It was really hard to get a feel for how well the Starbuck could do. This past year in 22, I planted all my wheat acres to Starbuck. I said, I'm going to give this variety a try. So it was a super positive story, at least on my farm. And from what I'm hearing from other farmers so far, they had very good yields off their Starbuck. So this, the shot on the left is, standing up well. Another shot there of the combine. That's really nice. The straight cut, it threshed very well. And I had a little bit of lodging where I double fertilized, but very acceptable for our moist, dark brown soil zone. Typically, we are happy with 40 to 50 bushel an acre on the wheat. And this year, we're straight cutting here on the right-hand side, stood up very well. But this year it yielded, by volume, it yielded about 60 bushels per acre, which I was very impressed with. They're just a shot of the combine yield monitor. It makes you feel good when for about 10 seconds in the field, you hit 74 bushels per acre. So we know it didn't average that. But the interesting part to me was that it was all graded number one. You can see at the auger there, I'm taking samples, but the test weight was very high, 65 pounds a bushel. So that adds another 10% to the yield. So the actual yields were about 65 bushels per acre. On our farm, that's pretty exceptional. So I was super happy with the grade and how it stood up, how it yielded, and how it graded. So overall, a very positive experience. And I'm hearing similar experience from other farmers, especially north and east of my farm in Saskatchewan, where we had a bit enough rain, and guys had some very good yields on the Starbuck and possibly on Wheatland too. So that's mostly my story and my staff pick. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren.
Good morning, everybody. So I think most of you know me, Lauren Wensley. I'm the Northern Saskatchewan marketing rep for SeCan based out of Lucky Lake. I'm going to run you through a couple of our newer malting barley varieties, CDC Fraser and CDC Churchill. So first of all, we're going to run through CDC Fraser. I'm pretty sure most of you have figured this out. We have a little naming structure with our new malting barley varieties based on the rivers, Canadian rivers. So CDC Bow, obviously the Bow River, CDC Fraser, Fraser River, CDC Churchill, the Churchill River. Yeah, so this is kind of our ad, nice clean water Canadian on the CDC Fraser. This is just a quick snapshot of where all the uptake has been so far on CDC Fraser. I would suspect that we'll probably get it, a few more people picking it up based on the new CMBTC recommendations that Jim was talking about. So most importantly, what do the maltsters have to say? Agronomically, we can love any variety agronomically, but when it's a malting variety, we have to make sure the maltsters are wanting to take it, are interested in it. That's what matters. So here's just a few snapshots of what some of the maltsters are saying. Canada malting, I like Fraser from a commercial malt standpoint. It is shaping up to be the Metcalf replacement we've been looking for. Prairie Malt was saying it's a high yielding, high enzymatic variety with malt characteristics that make it a good fit for adjunct brewers who make up the majority of the domestic and export malt market. Prairie Malt will be steadily increasing its purchases of CDC Fraser over the next few years in response to increasing demand for the variety. For brewers and distillers, I know Viterra is very much on board wanting to get more and more growers growing this variety so they can get more, buy more malt. We've got a new logo for it, the next great one you can see there. So we'll be kind of starting to do some marketing based on that new logo as well. Matt Enns, he's been growing. He owns Maker's Malt at Rostern, but he's also a pretty big farmer there. And so he does a bunch of variety trials every year, and he's had Fraser in his most years. He's even done some, I'll show you a little bit of marketing on the malt beer side that he's done as well. And then Peter Watts from this Canadian Malt Barley Technical Center. Malting barley can be processed differently to produce different specs. Fraser can be slightly under modified and produce what would be typically consider Copeland-like specs, but it can also be well modified and produce what we normally think of as Metcalf type specs. Arguably, Fraser is more versatile than Copeland or Metcalf as it can fit both categories. So that's pretty cool that you can modify it differently to be more like Copeland or more like Metcalf. Just touching on this again, Jim ran you through all this, but on the left hand of your screen, that's kind of what we've seen for the last multiple 3-4 years, something similar like this Metcalf and Copeland kind of towards the top, your Synergy, and then some Connect, Fraser kind of on the bottom. Finally, we've had a huge shakeup, which is very promising for some of these new varieties. So this is kind of the biggest shakeup I've ever seen on one of these lists. So yeah. What do growers have to say? So again, if the maltsters want it and it's agronomically strong, one thing I keep hearing about is the standability on Fraser is quite strong. Dale Wiley, he's right by Prairie Malt at Bigger there, and he's grown Fraser for numerous years, and they've had quite a few dry years the last few. So, and it's consistently been kind of one of his top yielders, if not on the top. Yeah, in side-by-side trials, it's been standing well and yielding well as well. And then so this was some of the marketing stuff we do. I know making some beer doesn't always help you guys sell malting barley, but I mean, it helps get the name out there. I try to have these available on tours and stuff just to get the name out there and get people thinking about it. The one on the right, the black can, that was the one Maker's Malt made. So in I think it was 2020 crop, they had 4 different varieties: Fraser, Copeland, Connect, and Copper. They malted, or they grew them all side by side, combined them separate, malted them the same, and then had beer brewed and sold them in 4-packs. So technically, the only difference in taste should be the barley variety. Just something again to get the name out there. The one in the middle was a pretty cool project. Aaron Beatty and I got to go to 9 Mile, and I say help them brew it. We didn't really do much. It was more for photo ops, but it's kind of cool. I got to add the hops in. So it was the Crop Development Center's 50th anniversary last year, but because of COVID, they had their big barbecue and celebrations this year. So they wanted a special beer made out of a CDC variety. So we got Prairie Malt to give us some CDC Fraser malt, and 9 Mile was able to make this special CDC Fraser beer. So it's kind of cool. They used it at their barbecue as well as multiple tours and stuff we've been giving them out. So the next one is CDC Churchill. The main claim to fame on this one that we've been seeing is just the very, very high yields. It's been competitive with all the top yielding varieties, like including all the feeds. It's been equal or better than Austinson. So next slide is, okay, so this is a trial that was very near and dear to my heart at Dale Wiley's this year. So what we did is we got him to put in all the CMBTC recommended varieties so we could see them all side by side. So this picture, it was taken, I think it was August 11th when the CMBTC had their big 2022 trial, or like their tour, where we took a bunch of people from Japan and overseas and stuff to see all these trials. So I just thought it was cool to see some of the lodging, the differences in maturity. And then underneath, I put the yields. So the yield is directly underneath the picture of it there. So in this trial, CDC Churchill was the top yielder. We had Austinson in there just as a check for yield, and you can see, I mean, they're pretty close there, but it did kind of beat Austinson. One thing to notice too on this is CDC Copeland just has not been performing. Again, this was very dry. I think he had about 4 inches, maybe 5 inches of rain. So it's shocking that the yields were as good as they were. But yeah, the Copeland, the older varieties just haven't been holding up in the drier conditions. The new genetics are definitely taking over for sure. So here's our kind of map of where it is. There's quite a bit in Saskatchewan, more on the malting side, and a lot in Alberta. I think they're just growing it as a feed even, and bonus if they get malt, but the yield is just so good that they're just whatever. If that's a lot of people are like, I don't know why, I might as well just grow Churchill. If I make malt, great. If not, the yield is still there. I'm not losing anything, so it can still sell as a feed as well. Next, yeah, here's just some snaps. There was a lot of, or not snaps, tweets. Lots of people were super excited about their Churchill, expecting big things, and a lot of farms, I think it was one of their top yielders, if not the top one. We did experience a little bit of lodging this year, which it generally has a good lodging rating. Fraser would be a bit stronger, but for the most part, they were okay with it when their yield was so high. So just again, some more pictures of people enjoying their yields on their Churchill. And then, of course, the most important part, right, is the beer. So I didn't have anything to do with this one. I just got to deliver it to some people. But so this was a Churchill Smash, so single malt, single hop, that was malted at Red Shed and then Born, Colorado in Calgary, made the beer. So again, just some marketing, trying to get the name out there. Some people thought this one's single malt, single hop. It had the mosaic hops. It tasted a little bit like a pine tree, some people said, but some people really liked that kind of a taste. But yeah, so just some marketing things we're trying to do this year. I'm going to be going to some other meetings and trying to have some kind of barley events, just again, trying to get these names out there and try and get people to try these new varieties. And it sounds like with Fraser and Churchill, things are looking great on the malting side. So we will turn it over to Mira to talk about some Durhams.
Good morning, everybody. So we're gonna take it down south to look at my 2 favorite picks of Durham. So I had to pick more of a Alberta Durham, and then also this is one in Saskatchewan that's done really well. So 2 very different products, but 2 that have really performed really well in the field, and I'd love to see. So the first one would be AAC Stronghold. So this is, many of you maybe came to Crop Production Show a couple of years ago where we had this knight standing on the left hand side. It didn't really get many people, just a lot of kids, which made crop production show a little bit longer than necessary, but anyways, so Stronghold Durham claim to fame is its standability, but also the soft fly tolerance. So when this variety came out, I remember it came out like 4 years ago when I first started, and really weren't sure where the fit was. I think it only comes out 102 or 3. I don't even know what it comes out in the seed guide. But it doesn't really stand out. And props to all the seed growers for still picking it up and growing it because of you guys, essentially. We kind of found its niche is on irrigation, pushing it for fertility. It will stand. It's the only variety with a very good for lodging. And then plus it also has that soft fly tolerance. So because of everyone that picked it up, we kind of found that niche. I get it every year at Egg Expo. What else can I grow? What else can I push like Stronghold? Do you have anything else for me? And we honestly do not. We do not have anything that has a very good for lodging. I don't know if there's anything else that can stand as well as Stronghold for Durham on the market. And then also it has that soft fly, obviously. So does really well in Alberta, also does well in the dry land. Also irrigation in Saskatchewan as well. So I think we have a couple posts about it. We do obviously have it in some trials. It did #1 at Stamps. It wasn't by a lot. I think it was only like 0.5% or 1 bushel or something. It wasn't very much. But then also here on the right, it can also do well on irrigation in Saskatchewan. So really nice to see it. Again, if you are looking for something, obviously with a solid stem and that standability, Stronghold is the one. If you do have any higher generation of Stronghold out there, seed growers, let me know. Let me know what you have. We are looking for some higher gen seeds. So if you do have some, give me a shout, and hopefully we can move some. Next up, we have the CDC Defy. This little piggy on the right here, I don't think you can see my scroller, but it's just, I just smile when I see this one. It's so cute. Thank you, Todd. Well done. But basically we have a petting zoo theme going on with our ads, and I'm totally here for it. It's great. So CDC Defy, defying the odds is the kind of thing that we're trying to give off. So it has that fuzz tolerance. So in Saskatchewan, we're special. We have the MS5, the MS star, and then it is also for yield. So it really has both those features. And in the dry year and in with moisture, it has done really, really well. So if we skip to the next slide, we can see how it did this past year. I don't know why I started calling it the apple of my eye, but now it's just works perfectly. And this is Creepy Mira in the background, or Bitmoji, because it just did so good this year. So this was this year. So this was obviously with more rain. So Craswell's on the left here, ran 79 bushels. It stood phenomenally. So it is a bit taller. It is like your Spitfire height, but it does have a good for lodging. So everyone's always nervous once it starts keeps growing, that it's going to start lodging. It can lodge for sure, but if you only get about 6 inches of rain, most times you're okay. And then it also did really well down at Riviere, just south of Regina at SeCan here, or Radville, sorry. It ran really well too. So this was on more moisture. But it also did really good in 2021 when it was so freaking dry, off like 2-3 inches of rain. It was still running 50, which was phenomenal, and grade, quality, it all looks really, really good. So definitely more of a Saskatchewan product. If you're putting this on irrigation or something in Alberta, you need to put a PGR on it for sure, but more of a Saskatchewan dryland product. But so far it's looking really, really good. The next thing I'm going to chat about is Pence. So Pence is about half an hour west of Regina, where I am. And we're lucky enough that we get to do some variety trials there. So if you look in the back on this left-hand photo, we have over 5,000 small plots there. That's for the CDC, Ag Canada. Todd, you're doing great. Good job. That's separate, but I get to steal a little plot of land. On the left here, there's Keystone Road, which isn't a crazy busy road, but it can get a little bit crazy. This is where we show our Durham trials. So I say trials if you're a research person, it is probably the most redneck research ever. We are literally taking a drill, getting all 6 varieties and putting them in. Don't know how deep it's going. Really just wanting to see the height difference. And then we've realized in the last 2 years of having it here that there's a lot of sawfly pressure. So it's awesome to see the new varieties, how they do against sawfly, and just in general, the heights and just everything. It's nice to have it nice and close. So on the end, Todd, if you want to do that again, we have our Grainland on the far, and then Stronghold, and then what Todd was saying, or not Todd, Jim was saying with the irrigation. No, what Jim was saying, oh, sorry, with the Vanta Black. Sorry, Dawn, your thing confused me there. With the Vanta Black, that's like the Vanta that you see there, super, super black on, and that's where Vanta gets its name from. And then we have the Antler, and then the Defy, and then the Spitfire. So just on the top right, again, wanted to show you the black, the very, very black, that's Vanta. And then at the bottom right here, just wanted to show you again, the sawfly, like the solid stem versus the hollow stem. So on the left, it's kind of a bad picture because this is already girdled by sawfly. This is Vanta, and then in the middle, that's Stronghold, and then on the right there is Grainland, and then on the right is CDC Defy. So again, Stronghold and Grainland are our main solid stems, and then Vanta and Defy are our hollow stems. Okay, so this is, again, take this information with a grain of salt. This is, again, redneck research, but this is how it turned out this past year. So what we're looking at essentially is yield is on our left-hand side, and on our right-hand side is protein. And then we obviously have our varieties down at the bottom. And the varieties that are yellow, those are the ones that graded a 1. And then the varieties that are blue are the ones that graded a 2. So super interesting to see. Defy right now is our top yielder. On paper, Defy is our top yielder. And it's crazy to see Vanta. This was very similar information that we got last year as well, but I was like, it's only 1 year. Who knows what's going on? But Vanta is just, and so 5 bushels more than the Defies, like Spitfire and the Stronghold. But Vanta here just did extremely well. And then another interesting thing, normally it's not protein and yield. Like normally it'd be like Grainland, you get high yield but a low protein, but Vanta had a high protein and a high yield. So it looks awesome. Again, like if you are looking for some, let us know. It is a little bit strange. Defy, Antler, and Spitfire all are our hollow stems, versus Stronghold, Vanta, and Grainland are our solid stems. So normally that would be opposite if you're in an area that has high sawfly. But Vanta is a little bit of an odd duck in the sense that it's extremely short. So again, it's like the Navigator replacement. It's very, very short compared to a Defy, but it is still a hollow stem. So Vanta just comparatively, and Richard and Curtis are also putting their minds together to kind of figure this out. Vanta as a hollow stem only had 20% cut in, versus Defy as a hollow stem had 80% cut in. So very weird. We don't know why this is. They're still trying to put their minds together. But again, something to look for. I do not think that Vanta will replace a Stronghold on irrigation. Because I don't think it would stand as well. Stronghold again just stands phenomenal, whereas Vanta, I don't even know its standing rating, but I believe it's a good or a fair maybe. I don't think it'll replace it, but again, I just think Vanta looks great for standability, the height of it, the yield. It just looks awesome. So if you are thinking of growing a new Durham, let us know and we can definitely find some for you. Is there any questions? Oh yeah, no, I think we're good. Okay, I'll pass it over to Trent.
Oh, I'm spotlighted, it says here. Morning, everyone. For me, it was actually really simple. I couldn't pick just one. And it's all about straw strength and yield. And AAC Wheatland VB and ESMA are my hands down picks as my staff picks. So the ad for Wheatland, I think it's cool, even though I don't get the Miley Cyrus reference that Mira said that there is. It makes no sense to me at all, but whatever, she doesn't understand Star Trek either, so we'll go with that. AAC Wheatland, I've got to see it right since it was BW 5013, and it's always been about standability, yield. Yeah, those are my it's outstanding in the field for it. It's yielded across the board, and let's go to the next one, Todd. And this is the same picture that Jim showed, just from a different angle. And the front rep here is at St. Albert, had about 107 pounds of N, back had 137, I think. And Wheatland's just standing phenomenal in here. Really, the only thing that was any better would have been Carberry stood really well, and Penhold. And Penhold is still the best for straw strength I've seen in a spring wheat in our lineup. It's integrating wheat anyhow. We see this in the field over and over and over. Maturity, it's very similar to Brandon, and that's why Brandon's the refuge in it. It also has better sprouting tolerance than Brandon. I think it was 2 falls ago, we had some issues with the sprouting in the Brandon, and Wheatland is rated good for sprouting, and it showed in our demos. It had a higher falling number, and it held its grade a little better. So yeah, it's been everything I've wanted to see in a CWRS. Let's go to the next one. A couple misconceptions about a midge tolerant wheat that come up over and over and over and over and over again. Is I need to buy new seed every second year. And actually the stewardship allows for 1 generation of farm saved seed. So buy your certified seed, grow it out, and then have a bin of it. And if you don't have midge, I don't need a midge tolerant wheat. And I love stories. Everybody knows I love to tell stories, and I'm dying having to stand still here to do this so you can see me in the screen. But let's go to the next one. So we've been a part of a project with Dr. Tyler Wist from Ag Canada in Saskatoon the last 2 years, where we've had those nice little orange midge traps out across the prairies. As staff, we've had some out, and we've got members to do and agronomists all across the prairies. This is actually a field of Lawrence Kapitsky's just east of me at Andrew. This was Brandon that was beside a field that would have been Stettler the year before, and it was 2 years out of Brandon. And we weren't sure what we would find for midge out here. It's a pheromone. The pheromone is the little thing in the middle of the card I'm holding there. And then all those little dots, those are male midge. And you just have to have something smelly out there, and male midge, they love it. This card had about, I don't know, I think about 150 to 200 on it. I didn't put Jim's card in here from that year, but the way Jim's card looked was if you just took the white and turned it to orange, and you have the little spaces of white in there, that was Jim's, because Jim had a card that just looked like crazy. Go to the next one. So there's just a close-up of it. You can see all those little midge on there. I think, Jim, you counted like 12 or 1,300 on your card. And we had others that were over 1,000, which is crazy. And it's not an indication that you're going to have damage, because it's actually the female that does the damage. But it's an indication that there's midge out there, and on a much wider scale. So we had members from Three Hills, Clive, up in the Peace, in southern Manitoba, all across Saskatchewan, all seeing very similar to this. So as an insect, it's very, very widespread. Will it cause economic damage? In Jim's case, no. They actually put a female pheromone trap out, and they caught the parasitic wasp that feeds on the larvae. So there was Mother Nature was kind of keeping Jim's issue in check, but now he's gone to Starbuck which is a midge tolerant wheat. And, you know, he doesn't have to worry. Let's go to the next one, Todd. He doesn't have to worry about going out and spraying or doing the checks late at night or early in the morning. He's got a midge tolerant wheat, and it's just, it drove home for me how much value there is in a midge tolerant wheat, because you have across the board all the new midge tolerants. They're shorter, stronger strawed, agronomically superior to what, say, the first, even or the second generation was. And at AgriTrade this year, Wheatland was the only tech Bolton I ran out of, because everybody had a good experience with their Wheatland. So for me, it's performed in the field exactly the way it looks on paper, and you get free insurance. You don't have to worry about going out and spraying. And then my next one is ESMA. So we're going to put my ESMA hat on. I hope everybody can see my ESMA hat. This comes out of the whole campaign, Das Barley, you know, German performance for Canadian farms. Let's go to the next one. And the ad that goes along with it is much more of a story about where it came from. We started looking at these European short, strong, strawed barleys in 2017, because lodging in barley has always been an issue, and straw management. If you're going for grain, what do you need all the straw for? And we had a screening trial just north of Edmonton, and we just had some strips in. And it was at that time the chair of the Alberta Barley Commission and one of the maltsters walked in, and Jason just kind of stalls at the Euro barleys and goes, Trent, when can we get one of them? 5 years later, we released ESMA and actually KWS Kelly. I had more background in ESMA. So that was the one, and we had more seeds. So that's the one we're running with. We now have both on the market. And let's go to the next one, Todd. And it's performed in the field, again, like it did in the plots. You know, this is a tweet that I got sent to me along with the pictures of the grain in the field. You know, it's 140 bushels to the acre, and it's weighing 55 to 56 pounds. When all was said and done in this field, the weight adjusted average was over 150 bushels to the acre. Now, it did go down a little, and the plan for next year with is to use a plant growth regulator if the moisture is there. But the yield is definitely there with ESMA, and big plump kernels. This is just that same overhead again that Jim showed earlier, that has kind of on the right there, you're going to have CDC Durango, and right in the middle, I've got ESMA. And then just the standability. This is what we've seen over and over and over. And for sure, you can get a little lodging. It's still barley. Even in the wheat, you can still get it at higher fertility, but they are the last of the barleys to go down. And when you add in that they're, at least in my environment in Alberta, they're 6 to 10 inches shorter than a traditional barley. There's just a lot less mass to put through a combine. I had a farmer come up to me at AgriTrade and go, you know, my agronomist said that my ESMA, and he was from Bashaw, so East Center Alberta, that my ESMA, my agronomist said, there's no way this is going for 100. And he goes, I got into the field with a combine, and he's on the phone with the agronomist, you got to come out and see this. And the agronomist goes, well, what's going on? And he goes, no, you just have to come. That field ran over 130. It doesn't look like it, but when you get it into the field, it just yields like crazy. So top complaints, and these are real complaints that I had. I did condense them a little bit. It's like, where am I going to store all this barley? My auger can't keep up, and that was a 14-inch auger, but it was trying to keep up with 5 combines. There's a VOA with it, and I'll talk, I think, a little bit about VOA in a second, but with these yields, I can overlook it. Did lodge, but it's worth it. And the bottom one was actually a member that phoned, if these yields, you know, if it yields too much, if everybody grows it, it's going to be $4 barley. And for him, it was the first time he did back-to-back over 100 bushels of the acre on the same field 2 years, 1 year after the other. So it was very impressive. So with the VOA, it's a variety use agreement, it's variety specific. We as the distributor decide which variety it's on in consultation with the breeder. It's administered by Seeds Canada. And from a farmer customer perspective, they only pay for it if they want a farm saved seed. And I think that's key. They don't pay anything if they take it all to the elevator. If they don't like the variety, they move it onto the elevator, or if they go back to buy more ESMA again, a certified seed. And we're finding this year, the comments from members is they're actually getting more repeats than they expected. And not declaring reporting is actually a VOA agreement, so a contractual agreement violation, and it's a violation of plant breeders' rights. And why a VOA? Well, it's a value creation tool so that we can invest back in new varieties. And the biggest misconception out there is that this is feeding the big multinationals. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. I see in the chat earlier today about the new forage oat about in Jim Dick's program, it might have a VOA. Jim's about a small family-owned breeding institution you're going to find anywhere. And both ESMA and Kelly come from small, well, maybe not small, but family-owned breeding institutions in KWS or in Ackerman in ESMA's case. And off to Brad.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me now. Oh, there, I can see myself. Okay, I'm going to talk about my two picks, which is AAC Douglas and Young R2X. So in Mana, here's our beautiful ad. I love this ad that Margaret came up for us. Cute little dog. I got some banner stands made for this if anybody wants to borrow them. And Maddie's been whipping up some real cool brochures with Doug the dog here as well. So we'll try and get Doug out all over the place. He's a lot of fun. Go ahead, Todd. So in my environment here in Manitoba, the big yielding oat varieties right now on the marketplace are CDC Arborg and CDC Endure. But those two varieties are quite tall, and that would be the biggest complaint that my growers talk to me about. So AAC Douglas is keeping right up with them in Manitoba for yield, right there with those big yielders. But as you can see in this picture here with Darcy Timchishan, considerably shorter, stronger straw. So if if Douglas looked like the other ones, maybe we would have used like an English Mastiff for the ad or something. But instead, we've got a Jack Russell Terrier because it is nice and short and strong straw. Go ahead, Todd. This is a picture of my trial, the one on the right, my oat trial at Fort White this last summer. And it's at a stage where you can see there's some maturity differences there. And AAC Douglas comes in a little bit earlier than varieties like Summit and some of the other ones that are in the trial here. You can especially see it in that second rep, Todd, if you want to put your cursor there. The Douglas is right beside the Summit in the second rep. All right, there, yeah, that one's a lot more noticeable, the Summit versus the Douglas. Okay, go ahead. Next slide is a picture. This is from Trent's trials out in Alberta. And if you remember what they were saying, on the left is the kind of normal fertility. And then on the right side is the much higher fertility. And the only real oat in this picture that started to lodge was that OT 6024. The Douglas is looking great in both the normal fertility and the higher fertility. So like I was saying, nice strong straw. It's working out really good that way. I think the next picture is another angle. And on this one, you can see off to the right, the forage oats really started to lay down in the back. So the back rep there is the higher fertility, and you can see they really went down. And the Douglas is that kind of higher or more mature right there. Yeah, you can see its maturity there, and it's also standing really good. And to the left of it was that OT 6024, which is a little bit later, and it is starting to go down a bit in that back rep. Go ahead. So one of the biggest success stories with Douglas in my environment is its lack of shatter. So shatter has been a big deal for the last number of years in Manitoba for a couple reasons. One, we're using more and more fungicides on our oats in Manitoba, and our canopy is looking just like that picture of Douglas on the left there, where you've got this grass green straw and the head is ripe. And so what's happening is it's just staying ripe so long. And then because most of our oats go to the millers, we're not usually allowed to use glyphosate as a desiccant. So we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting for it to mature so we can go in there and straight cut it. And we're just setting ourselves up for that big high wind, very windy fall day where we get a lot of shatter. And so that's switched a lot of people out of some other varieties that do shatter more. But I'm so happy to say that Douglas has been really holding that grain tight and is not shattering. And that's been one of the biggest success stories for Douglas. Go ahead. So what are people saying about Douglas? So this is Mark Durand from Durand Seeds in Notre Dame, Manitoba. Go ahead, Todd. And Mark says, I've grown for 2 years now, both CDC Endure and AAC Douglas, and I'm planning to drop CDC Endure because for 2 years in a row, its bushel weight was lower than Douglas. So he's sticking with Douglas. Go ahead. Joe Wallace is in Pilot Mound, and Joe says AAC Douglas does not shatter, and the shattering has been a big deal in his area for him and his customers. So he's been super excited that Douglas is holding that grain in the head. Darcy Timchishan is up in Arborg, Timchishan Farms, and Douglas was by far the nicest variety on our farm this year. And Darcy had CDC Arborg, CDC Endure, Wesley, and Douglas, and he had a lot of rain in Arborg this year. It had very tall oats, and his combine was going very slow on some of his fields, and he was super happy with his Douglas compared to some of these other varieties. I didn't have a great picture of Rory. That's him in the middle with the blue shirt. Rory's with LD Seeds in Altona, Manitoba. And Rory says Douglas was the top yielding oat on our farm this year. Nice, short, strong straw on AAC Douglas. And he also grew Endure and Summit on their farm, just to give you some perspective. So lots of hype on Douglas. Lots of people are excited. Richardson Milling has approved it for milling. They did their 2 years of testing. We've been talking with Emerson Milling and Viterra and everybody else. We're waiting to hear back from them, but they need to run a little bit more through their systems as well. But once we get, the big one like Richardson through and tested it and happy, usually then everybody else falls in line and does the same. So hopefully everything goes well with them. So the next variety I want to talk about is Young R2X soybean. And it's always so exciting when you can get an earlier maturing bean like a 0009, but yet it yields more like a 004 or 005. And that's what we're getting about Young. And that's why I want to talk about it as being my pick. The other super exciting thing about Young R2X is that it is our first tolerant rated variety for iron chlorosis and IDC. And the biggest problem with Mahoney R2 on the right, you can see in the picture here, was that it was susceptible to IDC. And you can see how yellow it goes when it gets stressed. Whereas the Young is super nice, dark green, grows through it, looks good, and it's been super great that way. And almost every year we see this. It's been a really good variety for that. Next picture, it's also a very vigorous seedling. So you can see in this picture the Young compared to Prince, how much taller it is. And that's going to be super important as we go west in Manitoba, and as we get into farming practices where there's less tillage, more stubble. We want a variety that will really pop up out of the ground and close that canopy quick. And Young is giving us that. It's also a nice tall plant. So on the left is our Mahoney, which was a big variety as we went west in Manitoba, and Young has given us a nice taller plant. So when we do get into some drier conditions, it's going to make harvest easier. It's going to keep those pods up off the ground and make for a much better product to harvest. Again, like I said, with the first slide, big yields compared to later maturing varieties. It's so exciting when we can get a 0009 yielding like a 004, 005, and that's what we're getting with Young. So what are the people saying about it? Well, here's a picture of Daniel Wyrich. He's in Oak Bank, Manitoba. And Daniel said to me, Young R2X is my early bean, so I can get started right away. And the best part is they yield like later beans. My Young R2X field averaged 58 bushels per acre this year, which is the same as his Bork R2X, which is a more of a medium maturing variety. This is kind of fun. We can, throw in some different voices for all these different testimonials. Here's Graham Morrow from Darlingford. Hey, the best IDC tolerance we've seen. It's been early to the bin, is what Graham says. Go ahead, Todd. And Darcy Unger is from Stonewall, and he says, young R2X soybeans with their excellent IDC tolerance, very early maturity, and high yields are a terrific fit for my growers. And Fred Gregg is in Reston, Manitoba. Young R2X have the maturity, the stature, and the IDC rating we look for. And Simon Ellis in Warren, Manitoba. I think Simon's on the line, so I shouldn't make fun of him. Our young R2X were 5 days earlier than our Hart R2X and Bork R2X. They yielded 57 bushels per acre. So lots of excitement and enthusiasm around young R2X, especially that it's yielding like the bigger, later varieties. Definitely a soybean to try out if you're looking for a new soybean as a seed grower, or oh, sorry, what did I say? Yeah, definitely Wawanesa, Manitoba is where Simon's at. So yeah, give young R2X a try if you're interested in trying out some SeCan soybeans. Go ahead, Todd. I think Trent's going to take it over again.
Just real quick, and there's a pile of honorable mentions in our lineup. You look at our seed guide, there's just, you know, a plethora of different things. I just arbitrarily picked some that kind of stood out to me. We didn't talk about 6-row barley at all, and we've got 2 fabulous 6 rows, both smooth on, AB Advantage and AB Toefield out of FCDC Olds College. You can see the tweet, that's Andrew Kittle sent me that. Never had more compliments on a variety, and that's AB Advantage heads there. AAC Red Star, very early maturing hard red spring wheat, and it stands really well, especially in Alberta. And then Ellersley's unique. It's out of the University of Alberta. It's our only unleaded. I think Shaw's pretty much gone by the wayside now. So it's honest, looks really cool. And yeah, plows more.
I guess I can talk about this one. We, a couple years, like last year or the year before, we started this SeCan Seed Supply WhatsApp group. So the whole point of this group is just a quick, it's just SeCan members in it. And the whole point is if you're looking for some foundation Fraser or something and you're having trouble finding it, you can just put a quick note in there. Hey, does anyone have any foundation Fraser or, you know, foundation like stronghold that Mira was talking about is quick, isn't easy to find. Also the peas, I know a lot of the time I spend a lot of time in Saskatchewan trying to find high gen peas for the Manitoba and Alberta people. So sometimes that's just a quick way. And it also helps us as SeCan staff know if you guys are long something, we can send people your way. So here's just some quick examples. The more members we have on this, the better. We try to keep it just simply to seed supply, not getting too chatty, but if you're not comfortable responding to everybody in the group, you can definitely direct message them or message me or one of the SeCan staff and we can get back to those people for you. And another thing, make sure you don't talk about pricing. We can't, the Competition Act, right? We can't talk about pricing in there. So I think you guys should be able to scan this QR code right now and it should get you to join the group. I think Mira or me will have to add you, but yeah, you can scan that and it should add you to the group if you're interested, or if you have any questions about that group, just let us know. I know in many years, lots of people are like, there needs to be a quick way for us all to chat instead of phoning someone and waiting for someone to get back to you for 6 weeks and all that. So anyways, hopefully it's a quick way for you guys to communicate.
Thanks, Lauren. I'll just leave that QR code up for a few more seconds. And if you don't happen to, you can't make that QR code work, just reach out to any one of the Team West and we'll gladly get you connected with Lauren and Mira and add you to that chat. It's been a very effective way of linking members with supply. So, so please take advantage of that opportunity. So that kind of is the wrap up for us. We'll just hold on here for a second and see if there's any last questions. As always, feel free to reach out to Jim, myself, any of the Western team to answer anything that might have popped up over these varieties about the new stuff coming out, or any of the ad campaigns we've got going. It's been, this has been not quite as good as having everyone in person, but it's certainly great to see the participation. We had up around 40 participants as of today. So if there are no further questions or comments, we'll let all the staff come back online so we can all wish you a very Merry Christmas and all the best